Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 1, Episode 16, Why Webinar Registrants and Content Download Leads Are Not Real Inbound, and What You Can Say to Them to Cause Conversion. My name is Beck Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump in, if you do me a favor, go to flipthescript.co and be sure to download the deck so you can follow along at each step of the way. I'm waiting. Just kidding. Let's go ahead and jump in. So first, why don't we start with a bit of an agenda? Frame up our time. There are going to be 3 different buckets to today's session. Number 1, we're going to start with what you can call them. So we're going to create a new term today. Number 2, how can you sequence them or put them into a sales engagement platform to have a comprehensive strategy? And then number 3, more tactical. What can you say to them to cause conversion? Let's start with what to call them. I actually have to give a little bit of credit here, which might be weird. If you look up Kevin Ayud, who is over at Adjust on LinkedIn, give him a shout out and blow him up on LinkedIn. He actually helped me coin this term with him together. But basically, true inbound is going to be, from my perspective, a hand raiser. Someone who requested a demo, for instance, or someone who came in through the chat box. So this is someone who says like, hey, I know who you are as a brand. I really want to get to know your product more. And so I'm going to become a hand raiser, ask for a demo. That is true inbound of this is a fish who is jumping in your bucket or jumping in your boat, and you need to gut and figure out if you can eat it and qualify it and then send it over to the sales team. True outbound is going to be anyone who has never heard of your company before. So this is someone who you have targeted maybe within an ABM approach, someone who you think like this is really an ideal candidate to buy my product. But this is someone that is true outbound. They have never heard of your product before, and so you're selling in completely cold, and that is the strategy and lengths you're going to have to go to are pretty deep to get someone in the bucket. Postbound is going to be everything in between. So this is everything in between a true hand raiser and someone who doesn't know you at all. So postbound is going to be comprised of all of the leads who do know your product, who do know your company, are aware of you through some kind of means within marketing, but haven't become a hand raiser yet. So this is typically a crowd that is rich with 2 kinds of people. Number 1, people who aren't necessarily qualified to buy your product. Sometimes people will disqualify themselves. They think, oh, I'm a little bit too small at this point. I'm not in the right stage of business, but I really, really like the content from this company. Or number 2, these are going to be people with a lot of staunch objections. So if I know your product and I'm not using your product, it's usually because of an objection. So an objection, it can be anything from, I don't have budget to I'm not the right person to, I don't necessarily have the team size. Or another option is I just don't want it. Of like, I'm just not in market, but I really, really like the content. So if you're a marketing team who's really, really effective, you are creating content that people would like to download regardless of whether they use your product or not. That to me is a litmus test of a really, really great marketing team. Of you are creating content that's so valuable that people would actually pay for the content alone. Meaning, I wouldn't suggest going super product specific all the time because you want to help someone in their role regardless of whether they buy your product or not to a degree. So it'd be content that's really high net value, but you don't actually have to use the product. And so postbound is going to be the category for everyone who's basically consuming that content, coming to your website, etc. And we can go into all the different scenarios, but they haven't become a hand raiser for some kind of reason. And so typically your SDRs are going to call on them. So postbound by a lot of teams is called inbound, and they'll be sent over to the inbound reps. And every single inbound team I've worked with, they'll say this isn't a true category of inbound because their experiences are completely different. Inbound is someone who's saying, I want to hear your product or I want to see your product. And so it's just a matter of logistics and setting up time or disqualifying, excuse me. And then postbound is going to be, these are a group of people that you essentially have to sell to. You have to convince them into, wanting to take some time with you. And so you need to go to the lengths of typically normal outbound with a little higher conversion, but normal outbound because they haven't become a hand raiser yet, and that's typically for a reason. So now we know what to call them. Thanks to Kevin Ayoud. Go look him up, AILLOUD, over at Adjust, and thank him for the idea. He was really, really smart and put in the cerebral brain calories. But how do we sequence the leads? So part number 2, I wanted to go into how do we sequence them? How do we speak to these postbound prospects in a way that makes them want to take a meeting? And then how do we scale that approach through sequencing? So of course, I'm going to be using Outreach as the platform today, where I'm going to showcase their platform and how I've sequenced it within their platform. But this is a good way that we want to add structure to how we're adding these people into sequences and how we're gearing the outreach in a comprehensive way to make sure that we get the most juice from the squeeze out of all of the inbound leads that are coming, or all the postbound leads that are coming in. So I've divided these into 2 different buckets. Bucket number 1 is going to be where you're going to mention the premise. So essentially, bucket number 1 is going to be a litany of different sequences, but this is the exhaustive playbook of all of the sequences that I'm building. So I'm sourcing to the attribution of where the lead came in, or what is the scenario of which I'm gearing the outreach, and then I'm personalizing on top of that to the person. But in this case scenario, you'll see on the left for bucket number 1 where you mention the premise, and then bucket number 2 where you won't mention the premise. And we'll get into why in just a minute. But bucket number 1, you do want to mention the premise, and everything highlighted in blue is going to be something that came over from marketing. So a couple of great examples here: content downloads, event attendees, webinar registrants, high value MQL. A lot of times people MQL whenever they download content. So that should all be clipped in the first 3 of content downloads, event attendees, and webinar registrants. But there are some examples when people open a lot of your marketing emails, or they come to your website a lot, and so they MQL outside of these efforts. So that should cover all of our bases. But these top 4 are the ones that come over from marketing. And the white here, these are going to be outbound scenarios. So basically premises and sequences that you're building, not based on a passover from marketing, but based on a certain premise or scenario that you want to gear your outreach coupled in with personalization. So for instance, we've got 5 that are listed here, but we can start with the top one. Executive churn, great company to do this through in an automated fashion is UserGems, by the way. But executive churn is going to be a sequence for, instance, let's say that I am selling with Seismic. Love Seismic, by the way. Shout out to Ed Calnan if he's watching this, and the team is amazing. But let's say that I'm with Seismic and I'm trying to sell into Intel. And there is a user, and I'm working with Drift. And there is a user at Drift that was a leader, that was the purchaser, that then churns from Drift into Intel. I want to sell to them because basically they use Seismic at Drift, and so it's likely to know that they would want to use Seismic at Intel based on different buyer personas. I mean, it's kind of a brash assumption, but they've used Seismic in the past and they were super happy with me, so they probably want to use Seismic at Intel too. So it's a quick low-hanging fruit to be able to sell into, people who've used Seismic in the past in an automated fashion. So this is a scenario. I've got firmographic triggers with hypergrowth, common VCs, that you share a common VC with the person you're prospecting into. And also a common VC sequence that I built is your prospect shares a common VC with one of your customers. So they're in the same portfolio. 2 different plays, but kind of the same premise. Demoed in the past on LinkedIn engagement, but you get it. This is a bucket filled with different sequences that you can deploy based on a certain premise. The blue is everything that was passed over from marketing that are postbound, that know the company, but haven't become a hand raiser yet. Bucket 2, I wouldn't mention the premise. So pretty similar in terms of approach, but I wouldn't mention the premise here, and we'll go in how to message them in a minute. But the blue is going to be passed over from marketing, and the white are going to be cold outbound scenarios that I constructed myself. But the 2 blue ones here are going to be website views and dark funnel. Dark funnel is leads that are researching you on the internet, but they have not become a hand raiser yet. We're doing more research than ever before. Before we talk to a salesperson, we want to know everything. How the tool works, what are the different features. If I can sit on my couch in my sweatpants and eat popcorn and basically get to know your tool, I'm going to try and do that before there's a high pressure salesperson situation. So within Dark Funnel, you've got a bunch of people who want to know who you are, but don't want to become a hand raiser and talk to a salesperson. So providers like G2 for Review, 6sense, or Bombora can kick through these Dark Funnel leads and tell you who is researching right now. So it's super invaluable information to you as a prospector because it makes a much more higher buyer intent because they know who you are. But here I wouldn't mention the premise for a myriad of reasons. I mean, each one of these is a different reasoning why, but the two most common, for website views in Dark Funnel, it can be seen as intrusive. Intrusive that that I was researching, kind of feel a little bit gated and like, tech is taking over the world, etc. Maybe I'm quoting my mom and dad too much. But it can feel a little bit intrusive. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to mention the premise, I would suggest that you say, use what I call classic role diffusion. Say something like where you diffuse a situation by basically entering into what a normal person does in that classic role in the screw up that they do and mention it beforehand so that you look self-aware. So a great example for website views is you would say, not to be the super creepy account executive or not to be the super creepy prospector or sleazy sales guy, but looks like you had visited the website quite a bit. More importantly, I saw you wrote this article, etc. And then you can, tie in the value hook and stick the landing in the CTA. But this bucket, I would not mention the premise, but I would surface them into sequences so that you can make your prospects, you can make sure that you're taking advantage of every single situation within your playbook. Here's kind of a side note that I will tell you a little bit more about these sequences that you're going to think I'm super nerdy, but it might be helpful. I took all of these sequences, I ran every single one of them with the team, even with personalized messaging, and then I looked for on the back end the results of these sequences. So I was very interested in what was the conversion ratio for each one of these sequences? Was it on first touch or third touch? And what kinds of meeting volume did I get off of this? Or what kinds of leaders did I get? Or what kinds of discipline did I get? Was it sales operations or sales enablement or sales or marketing, etc.? And then what was the conversion into close won business? So I, every single month, would re-gear, and you can do it every 2 months if you like. I would re-gear for my SDRs saying like, okay, content downloads is the most likely for conversion. Webinar registrants is third. So I'm going to identify which sequences are working for those 2 months in specific, and I would re-rank all of the sequences for my SDRs to where I told them not to fall in love and not to worry about which sequence goes first, but just to fall in love with counting. So I would rank for them out of all of these 15 sequences, which is the ones that are the most likely to give you meetings, and I would rank for them, maybe content downloads switched to number 7 and common VCs went to 2 and event attendees went to 5, etc. You get the math. But basically, I would switch out the sequences, switch out the number in front of them. So when my SDRs came in for the day, not only did they not have to worry about list building, not only did they have to not worry about automation, not only did they not have to worry about which people to call on, not only did they not have to worry about which, was it an email, was it a cold call, etc. Like what is the cadence of that? But they didn't have to worry about which one would be the most likely for conversion. So one of the best things that I did as a leader that was very relieving and enabling to my SDRs is taking all of the brunt of list building off of them by understanding from a high level based on historical data and not opinion, which one of these sequences is more likely to convert and what kind of meetings does it give me? So I would rank for them which sequence they should call on first. So they're spending their calories in the best place possible that will cause them be the most likely for conversion. Couple of great examples of post-bound sequences that I built. Number 1, evergreen content downloads. I think this one is really, really common. Number 2, webinar registrants that I would do evergreen. I mean, I would kick these leads through in real time. I do think it's worth noting that for postbound, if someone owned the account, then I would kick it over to that person who owned the account. And for all the people who hit ICC, hit ICT, meaning they were the right size company, they were the right title, but were not owned by an SDR, I created a team called the Postbound Unknown team. So basically this team was tasked with calling on all of the leads that hit ICC and hit ICT. They were part of the right company. They were the right title, but they also were not owned by an SDR, so that I had a comprehensive book. And the Postbound unowned team was some of the top performers. So there is quite a bit of squeeze, and this enables your SDRs to basically not be worrying about, from an automation perspective, which leads who downloaded content that didn't hit ICC and didn't hit ICT, who are people you don't want to sell into. They didn't waste any of their calories there. So they basically, sorry, I'm getting really heated because this structure piece is everything. Process with your SDRs is everything. I hear a lot like, I want tactical advice, and it's like tactical is secondary, maybe tertiary. It's first process, process, process. So the Postbound unowned team didn't spend any calories on wondering, is this someone I want to talk to? I took that off of them from an automation perspective. They were only calling on people that they basically wanted to talk to that weren't owned by the SDRs, and that team murdered their numbers. So, you know, from a infrastructure standpoint, if you want to create that team, you know, you can ping me for a couple of more tips, but I think you get the gist here. So it's webinar registrants, content downloads, and event attendees. It will be virtual because during the pandemic, but these are the top 3 most evergreen campaigns that I do within Postbound. In terms of what the sequence looks like, every single sequence looks the same in terms of structure. 16 steps over 21 business days. There's basically 5 emails, 10 cold calls, and 1 LinkedIn research step at the very beginning. You want to make sure that if your team is sending personalized messaging over to these prospects, that these are people that you want to call on. Data is really, really muddy nowadays. I don't know if I'm the only one that's running into that. You know, but if you, if you know a way to get extremely pristine data, call me. By call me, I mean don't call me, email me. By email me, email's the best case scenario. But LinkedIn research step number 1, 5 emails, 10 cold calls, more aggressive near the back end. So there's 5 different pods for every single sequence that I'm running. Pod number 1 starts on day 1, is a cold email, cold call, cold call. Pod number 2 starts on day 8, so a delta of 6 business days, cold email, cold call, cold call. Pod number 3 starts on day 13, a 4-day business day delta, cold email, cold call, cold call. I think you're getting the gist here or seeing a pattern. Pod 4 starts on 18, pod 5 starts on 20. So you're getting more aggressive with your prospect in the back end so that you get to know them in the beginning, be cool in the beginning, get to know them, say a couple things that resonate with them and that are personalized about them, and they get more aggressive near the back end. So regardless of if they're a content download, they're a webinar registrant, or they're an event attendee, or they're a high value MQL, the structure stays the same, but the mention at the beginning delta is based on the use case. So now we know what to call them. We call them Postbound, and now we know how to sequence them. But what do we say from the tactical front to cause conversion? Remember this crazy nerdy slide from earlier? So these are, remember, all the sequences that I'm building based on Postbound premises that are being sent over for marketing, and that I'm building for myself on cold outbound. For bucket 1, weather candid. Sorry about that. Not that this is a weather cam. This is a real slide deck for anyone watching. So bucket 1, you want to mention the premise. And bucket 2, remember, we didn't want to mention the premise because it's a little inappropriate. It might creep them out, but we still want to sequence them because there's high buyer intent. So bucket number 1, like I mentioned earlier before, whenever you go to an event and you attend a booth and they kick you, there's nothing worse than when they kick you an automated email that says, thanks for coming to the booth. You want to buy my stuff? If I wanted to buy this stuff, I probably would have scheduled some time when I was at the booth to set up a demo. So you want to take this as an indication that this person now knows who you are, but you still want to use the same alacrity, the same aggression in terms of how much you're researching them, because really this is a cold outbound lead. Because they do know who you are, but they haven't been a hand raiser, so you need to personalize and say something really significant to them that hits them at their core and makes a difference so that they're willing to take a meeting. So bucket number 1 for the Postbound premises, again, you want to mention the thing in an automated fashion for content downloads, webinar registrants, event attendees, etc. All those sequences, you can automate the first portion, even dynamic tag in which article they downloaded. So your SDR doesn't have to do it and kick them in real time. But basically, bucket number one, you want to do the postbound premise mention where you say like, hey, reason for my outreach is I noticed that you downloaded, that you watched the session on postbound leads, but more importantly, you want to talk about them. It's not about this session right now. It's not about you watching it. It's not about, you attending the event. It's not about you downloading the content. If you're selling, it's about them. It is about them. So you want to couch it for reference here in an automated fashion, transition with, but more importantly, and then turn the conversation into a conversation about them. Because here, you and your company is the hero. Here, they are the hero. So you want to make this conversation, even for postbound leads and content downloads, about them. So reason for my outreach is I noticed you downloaded the content. More importantly, I saw you wrote this article on LinkedIn where you're talking about scaling effective teams. So if you have the postbound premise and you can mention it, you're within, again, bucket number one, then I would automate it like this and pick out a personalized premise summary. If you're within bucket number two, and it's kind of inappropriate to mention the premise, like, again, website views, dark funnel, etc. You can read through the list. I'm not going to be a talking head here. But if it's bucket number two, you want to give them a personalized premise summary and then a personalized premise excerpt. So either way, you should have two pieces. In the first piece, you talk about the postbound premise transition and then go to them in summary. If you can't mention it, then I would go to personalized premise summary and then give them one line in specific that stood out to you. You really want to drill home that you know who they are and that you read their article by giving them some kind of line, that really stood out to you so that they're reassured that you actually took a look at their content, you actually took a look at their session, and you're not just using it to monetize them and try to sell to them. So what are the 5 premise buckets? How do we personalize? If you want to learn how to do this more deeply, I'm going to cover this very briefly. Go to Personalization at Scale, which is core session number 4, and I go into much more deeply how you can personalize. But high level, there are 5 buckets of premises you can personalize on. Self-authored content that your prospect wrote, so webinars, articles, or posts that they made. These are in descending order of where you'll see the most conversion, at least based on what I've seen with teams. Number 2 is engaged content, things that your prospect liked, shared, or commented on. 3 is identified traits, self-identified traits. So anything about their company line, profile line, or headline, basically stuff that they wrote about themselves in third person. Beck's a badass executor who loves scaling effective teams. That's where you can clip it and throw it in there in terms of personalization. Bucket 4 is going to be the junk drawer, schools attended, personal interests, hobbies, recommendations, skill endorsement. Basically, this bucket is the things that aren't necessarily really directly about their work, but are something about them on LinkedIn that you want to hook into what your value prop is. So be sure to make sure, regardless of which one of these buckets that you're picking and regardless which personalized premise, that you're always hooking it back into your value prop. So avoid the 10-80-10 where you're mentioning a piece of personalization. Hi, Beck, I noticed you live in San Francisco. How's the Golden Gate Bridge? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't build it, right? So, you want to make sure whatever premise you pick that you, tie into the value prop and then stick the landing in the CTA. And then the last bucket is company level data. M&A, blogs, posts, hiring, website language, you get the gist, but basically some detail about their company, least amount of conversion because it's about their company, not them, but still better than just being a template. So whatever reason that you pick, again, you want to tie that into the postbound premise. I saw you wrote this art, or I saw you downloaded this article by us. I saw that you watched this session on postbound premises. I saw that you attended this virtual event, but more importantly, I want to talk about you. I saw you wrote this article. I saw that you engaged with this content, et cetera, because really for the breadth of your conversation, you want to zero in on something that they've done that will make them really compelled to say like, okay, this message is really about me. And so I want to take the time to respond because of the amount of time that this rep spent in being relevant. So that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you really like this session, you want to hear more, go to flipthescript.co and be sure to check all the other sales topics we have there on the website. And if you really love this session, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, give us a follow, and tag your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. Have a great day.
Watch out.